Welcome into the final hour number 4 of the Fallout right here on Sports Radio 740. You can give us a call at 240-9230 or 1-800-239-9544. Right now we are joined by Frank Rossi. He's the co-host of D3 FB Huddle. He is a contributor to D3Football.com. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Russell, I'm decent. I know this is normally the Fallout 5 slot, but let's call this the Fallout for 2 plus 3, which really equals 5, because the two divisions, Division 2 and Division 3, had a pretty bad day today when you think about the announcements that came out officially.
Yeah, absolutely. And the councils came out, the president's councils came out and said that they were shutting down fall sports championships. Frank, as far as that, when you know, to the naked eye, to the amateur eye, you look at that and you say, okay, well, they've canceled these championships. We can play them in the spring, but there's so much more to this than that, isn't there?
Well, the President's Council, after the Board of Governors came out today and officially said it's going to be up to the divisions to do the dirty on this, ultimately, the President's Councils for both Division 2 and Division 3 said in their subtitles to their headlines, spring championships or fall championships in spring, we should call them, will not be occurring because of cost and logistics issues. So football championships for this academic year will not occur in Division 2 or Division 3. That is now official from those determinations from those President's Councils for those divisions. And that's a pretty interesting jump in a situation where we didn't even know officially what their stance was going to be on fall championships in fall, until this morning. I did tweet this morning saying we needed this kind of guidance, and it's good we have the guidance now, because, Russell, again, I said it last time on your show last month, the student athletes need to know where they're at here with respect to their enrollment decisions, et cetera, and now it's going to be up to the schools to make some decisions, but there's some other complexities that got thrown into the mix today from the Board of Governors about the testing guidelines that they had put out last month are now requirements, and those are some very expensive testing guidelines that are now requirements, and they may carry into the spring if things don't change.
Well, and so when we're talking about this and the requirements there for the testing, and this is one of the things we talked about when you were with us last month, you're talking about a Huntington College, you're talking about a Birmingham Southern, particularly in the state of Alabama, and they've shut that down. You're talking about Tuskegee, who's Division 2 school. The testing is economically, I don't want to say impossible, but it's very preclusive. And as far as this goes, I guess that means that we could see an end to all sports for this year until we get a vaccine.
What was interesting was in the 28 conferences in Division 3, 1 out of 28, the American Rivers Conference decided they were going to make a go of it in the fall. Football included. And we had their commissioner on our show, and essentially he said they weren't going to be following the NCAA's guidelines for testing. They were going to be following another set of guidelines that were based on college ideas, or the principle of having college students together on campus, and utilize those less stringent testing requirements or guidelines, and they felt comfortable that they were okay in doing so. These are schools out in Iowa and Nebraska and in that region. And we had them on the show. We thought, okay, great, good luck to you. Then when this thing happened today with the guidelines becoming requirements, we went back to the commissioner to ask, well, now what? What are you going to do now? And he's trying to appeal to the NCAA because the wording is a little bit cloudy. I'm not going to lie to you on it as to some of the documents we received today when we tried to correspond with the NCAA directly about this. But he's not feeling as good about it this week because, again, what they thought they were going to be able to do because testing was a little more affordable under the other guidelines is impossible under the NCAA guidelines, as you suggested, for Division 3 and Division 2. And this carries to the spring. Unless testing becomes, let's say, 50 to 70% cheaper, I would say, between now and I'd say January, because you can't make these decisions in March to play in March, ultimately. You really need them December and January to know where you're at with the costs of these situations of testing and insurance, et cetera. These things are going to be very, very problematic for any teams that want to play spring football. Five games or less, you don't use years of eligibility, but still, that's 5 games of testing you have to do.
As far as, and Frank Rossi joins us, you can catch him at d3football.com. As far as the economic impact to the schools, and we kind of hit on this as well, I actually spoke with Coach Turk there at Huntington College about this as well. This could be crippling to a lot of these schools that are private schools, that are very small schools, that have a large number of their undergraduates participating in intercollegiate athletics, because it is in a Division III setting. It is only merit-based scholarships. This could be particularly crippling to these smaller institutions.
Yeah, financial aid is where it's really found for them. And as you said, merit-based scholarships, but it can't be directly based on athletics in Division III and in some of the Division II schools as well. Not all Division II schools are scholarship. Don't forget, especially for all sports. But the point is not lost here that I was going to say this last time in your show. I'm going to say it now, and I still feel comfortable saying it. There's 247 schools that play Division III football. A good number of them, probably about 80% of them, 75 to 80% of them, are private schools. I would not be surprised if 15% of that number of schools don't go under as a result of COVID and COVID-related issues such as not playing athletics because of what it's going to do to the schools financially, ultimately. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't to a certain degree in playing football because, yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money to play it, but you may lose a lot of support from your alumni and other things like the gate receipts and stuff like that along the way. And so this is a big problem. And, yes, survival of the fittest may occur to these schools, but to see 15% of the private schools in Division III football possibly teeter ultimately over the next year, it's going to be scary to see it and disappointing because who loses out in the end but the student athletes that need the opportunities out there.
Frank, and I understand that your expertise is in D3 ball, but let me ask you about NAIA, because we have a school here in NAIA at Faulkner University that plays. Are they going to face similar things? Obviously, they're not related to the NCAA, so they don't go under that umbrella. But is the NAIA going to make a decision related to this in a similar manner?
Well, we saw on Friday, I believe, that they pushed their championship officially to the spring as to how that's exactly happening. I didn't read deep enough into it, but I think the NAIA has been sort of trying to do what my co-host James Baker always suggests doing in this whole thing, which is try to go as far into the decision-making process as you need to. Let's say possibly as far as September. See where you stand in September because things are changing rapidly. I mean, look, Florida had 15,000-ish or maybe slightly under that infections in one day a couple of weeks ago. Now they're back down to 4,000 to 5,000. Things change rapidly in this situation. And, make your decisions based on what the reality is at the time that you're standing in front of starting your season and then have your backup plans ready. I believe that's what the NAIA has been trying to do along the way here. I don't think their guidelines are going to be as stringent as the NCAA's. I don't think that the NCAA's guidelines are necessarily a Bible of any sort, and they admit as much in the documentation they put out today, although they want schools to follow them and also want them to augment them, which means make them greater with other state and local resources to see if they shouldn't be doing more testing or more policies. But the answer to your question is the NAIA may follow the course here. Having a school like UConn today back out doesn't help the landscape at all for FBS and NCAA, FCS and NCAA, or the NAIA schools down the line.
Ultimately, Frank Rossi joins us. You can catch his work at d3football.com. Ultimately, did the NCAA basically offer up D3 and D2 as sacrificial lambs for the hope that they can continue to play D1 Power 5 football?
Sacrificial lambs is a statement I won't go to, but I'm going to say it this way for you, Russell. They could have made this decision a couple weeks ago. A week and a half ago, they had a meeting. We were standing at a point where I think 20% of the teams in Division III football were still willing to play or hadn't made announcements at that point. It wasn't much greater than 20% at that point. And yet they didn't have the guts to make the decision at that point to say, look, Division 3, Division 2, go do your own thing. We get it. You don't have the resources. Division 1, we'll hold off because we know the FCS schools are pushing them not to cancel the championship at that point. The problem becomes the one-size-fits-all approach that they tried to do. And they tried to split the baby day a little bit. They basically said, here's a bunch of requirements we're going to bestow on all divisions, 1, 2, and 3. But then individual divisions, you're going to have to go and make the ultimate decisions on how to effectuate all these things. Well, that's great, except when you say your guidelines are requirements for testing, Division 3 can't suddenly say, well, we're going to actually back off that statement. You just impose that on Division 3 as much as you did on 2 and 1 if you're the Board of Governors. Period. That's the way it works. If you say 50% non-participation in a sport will cancel your championship, okay, division, go make a decision based on it. Well, all they're doing is basically ratifying the fact that 50% of the teams aren't playing, so we're canceling the championship. And the spring championship went with it, or the spring ability for a fall championship went with it in the same announcements today. So, Russell, they tried to act like they cared about 2 and 3 today, but in reality, they made the decisions for the president's councils for Division 2 and Division 3. They made these decisions for them. So I don't know what they were really in reality attempting to do besides acting like a good neighbor and not really giving two what's about it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Obviously, these decisions have been made. If, in fact, we do come up with a cure between now and, let's just say, December, if we come up with a vaccine that can be cheaply distributed and all of that kind of thing, is it in a spot where they could revisit this decision and potentially play the fall sports in the spring, or is that decision in stone and not possible?
I think it's in stone and not possible for the championships, at least for this reason. And this is the dirty little secret of the entirety of the NCAA. Anything that's going to counter-program against the NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament is a problem, ultimately, for the NCAA. Because that one event and the money that comes with it helps run Division III and Division II, ultimately, as much as anything. The percentages that are given to D3 are based mostly on that tournament and the revenues from CBS and Turner, ultimately. They don't want to counter-program, I don't think, at the head level right now, if they're able to get that tournament off the ground this year, unlike last year. Division III has enough problems because we lost the revenue from it in the 2020 version of what should have been March Madness. So I don't think the championship decision will be revisited at any level that has made the decision today. That said, too, though, Russell, testing is going to still be necessary, we've been told by Dr. Tony Strickland, who works at the Geffen School out in the UCLA, and he's a concussion specialist, but he also has been focused on COVID. And he told us on our show, flat out, testing is still going to be necessary in the spring because, A, not everybody's going to get vaccinated if we do get a vaccine in time, and B, even with vaccination, you still have questions about how situations are going to play out. You may not have to test everybody as frequently, but there will still need to be some level of testing, it looks like, even with a vaccine in March and April of next year. This is why a lot of people are beginning to wonder, are we even smart to bother playing in the spring, the 5 games or whatever we can maybe get into the spring, or should we just wait until fall 2021 and hope that we're back to normal at that point?
He is Frank Rossi. You can catch his work at Frank Rossi. Frank, tell everybody else how they can follow you and what all that you're doing and how they can participate in all the things that you've got going on.
Russell, I am a co-host for 12th year right now on In the D3FB Huddle. That's at D3FB Huddle on Twitter and In the D3FB Huddle on Facebook. We'll be putting out another video either tonight or tomorrow morning going through all the new stuff from the NCAA today. A lot cut through there, including liability waivers are not going to be allowed by the NCAA either for student athletes to play. They can't be mandatory. Things like that are huge changes today that we're going to discuss and let student athletes hear about, because those are the folks that have the most questions about all these decisions and seem to get the least answers. So we try to fill in the blanks for them there. Also, That's my co-host James Baker on D3FB Huddle. Also work with D3Football.com during the playoffs, especially. But right now, Russell, I don't think I'm working with D3Football.com too directly until probably over a year from now, because I don't see playoffs, as Jim Moore would say. They're not in the cards in the fall or the spring for D3 football.
Well, Frank, I really appreciate you jumping on. When I saw this, that was the first person. You were the first person I thought, let me send a text to clarify all this. It's really, really, you've wrapped it up in a nice little package, and I really appreciate the time as always.
I appreciate your interest in it, and let's hope for better times, Russell, that we can talk about actual gameplay on the field soon.
Absolutely, we'll do it. Stay safe, Frank. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Frank Rossi from D3 FB Huddle at D3Football.com. Again, I thought that given everything and the relationship that Huntington College has with the entire city, particularly Cloverdale, but the entire city of Montgomery, the relationship Tuskegee has, and all of those kind of things, really important to get Frank on. Obviously, as if you're just now joining us, the D3 President's Council and the D2 President's Council have canceled fall championships for all of those fall sports, which means, according to Frank, and he's the expert, that means that essentially no football will be taking place in 2020, even in the spring of 2021 for D2 and D3. We appreciate him joining us. We'll get a break here, Fallout 5, when we come back right here on Sports Radio 740.